day, everyone. We are the module for reporters, which is the properties of assessment methods. I am Carl Gabriel Isabella, and my focus is on Unit 1 Validity of Test. Validity. Validity refers to whether or not the test measures what it claims to measure. It is also the extent to which a test accurately measures what it is supposed to measure. In the fields of psychological testing and educational testing, validity refers to the degree to which evidence and theory support the interpretations of test scores entailed by proposed uses of tests. The validity of tests is critical because without sufficient validity, test scores have no meaning. The evidence you collect and document about the validity of your test is also your best legal defense. Should the exam program ever be challenged in a court of law? Test validity. To be valid, a test must measure what is intended to measure. 3 points to consider in a test validity. Validity is specific to some particular use. Validity is a matter of degree, and validity pertains to the results of the test. Content validity is typically estimated by gathering a group of subject matter experts or SMEs together to review the test items. The most important type for most certification and licensure programs. Emphasize important topics but give less attention to less important topics. Content validity is not tested for, rather it is assured by the informed item selections made by experts in the domain. Criterion-related validity is used to predict future or current performance. It correlates test results with another criterion of interest. It indicates the extent to which the instrument's scores correlate with an external criterion either at present or in future. A common measurement of this type of validity is the correlated coefficient between two measures. Construct validity. It indicates the extent to which a measurement method accurately represents a construct and produces an observation, distinct from that which is produced by a measure of another construct. Using a panel of experts familiar with the construct is a way in which the type of validity can be assessed. The experts can examine the items and decide what that specific item is intended to measure. Students can be involved in this process to obtain their feedback. Phase validity. When an phase validity refers to the degree to which an assessment or test subjectively appears to measure the variable or construct that it is supposed to measure. In other words, phase validity is when an assessment or test appears to do what it claims to do. Refers to the extent to which a test appears to measure what is intended to measure. A test in which most people would agree that the test items appear to measure what the test is intended to measure would have strong phase validity. Thank you for listening in my report.
Good day, everyone. I am Marisol Buntag, and I was assigned to report the Unit 2, which is the reliability of test. So, what is reliability? It is the degree in which an assessment tool produces stable and consistent result. It has to do with consistency, reproducibility of an examinee's performance on the test. A test that is administered to an examinee on 2 occasions have high reliability. You would be very likely to reach the same conclusions about the examinee's performance both times. Also, a test with poor reliability, on the other hand, might result in very different scores for the examinee across the two test administrations. If a test yields inconsistent scores, it may be unethical to take any substantive actions on the basis of a test. So there are four types of reliability: the inter-rater reliability, test-retest reliability, or the um, test-retest method, followed by the parallel forms reliability and internal consistency reliability. So we have here the test-retest reliability or the test-retest method. It is a measure of reliability obtained by administering the same test twice over a period of time to a group of individuals. Example: we have here a picture or an image that shows the example of the test retest. So, example 1. This test is for the reliability of a teacher made test using the statistical measure person R. Let X be the first administration of the test and let Y be the second administration of the test. So, we have here the table. Students from 1 to 8, we have the X and Y. So under the X, we have 50, 43, 48, and so forth. So person product moment correlation. We have here the formula where N is number of correspondents or examinees, X is scores of the test, and Y is scores of the retest. So to sum it up, test retest reliability is sometimes called test consistency. In other words, you give the same test twice to the same people at different times to see if the scores are the same. So, followed by the parallel forms of reliability. Parallel forms reliability is a measure of reliability obtained by administering different versions of an assessment tool. Both versions must contain items that probe the same construct, skill, knowledge base, and etc. to the same group of individuals. The scores from the two versions can then be correlated in order to evaluate the consistency of results across alternate versions. Example. So there is a table here which is the test A to test B. So example, if the professor gives out test A to all students at the beginning of the semester and then gives out the same test A at the other semester. So basically, the students may simply memorize the questions and answers from the first test. So if here they got 99, so sa test B nga pagabuhaton, which is the same question nga gihatag sa test A, na ay possibility or there's a big possibility nga ma-perfect nila ang question. So that is the parallel forms reliability. So letter C, the internal consistency reliability, is a measure of reliability used to evaluate the degree to which different test items that construct produce similar results. Split half reliability is another subtype of internal consistency reliability. This method involves splitting a test into halves and correlating examinee scores on the two halves of the test. Example: you wanted to give your clients a 3-item test that is meant to measure their level of satisfaction in therapy sessions. So, we have here the first question. You almost always feel satisfied after your therapy sessions. So, you agree with it or the client is ni agree? This second question is you you almost always enjoy therapy. So the answer is agree. And the last is you almost never feel satisfied with therapy. So this is disagree. So so the in so the internal consistency reliability is that if all items on a test measure the same construct or idea, then the test has internal consistency or the so-called reliability. And last one is the inter-rater reliability. It is a measure of reliability used to assess the degree to which different judges or raters agree in their assessment decisions. Inter-rater reliability also is very useful because human observers will not necessarily interpret answers the same way. Raters may disagree as to how will certain responses or material demonstrate knowledge of the construct or skill being assessed. All of the methods of estimating reliability discussed thus far are intended to be used for objective tests. When a test includes performance tasks or other items that need to be scored by human raters, then the reliability of those raters must be estimated. This reliability method asks the question: if multiple raters scored a single examinee's performance, would the examinee receive the same score? Inter-rater reliability provides a measure of the dependability or consistency of scores that might be expected across raters. So we have here the Pearson correlation coefficient R. The equation R, we have here the formula, is technically referred to as the Pearson correlation to distinguish it from other, less common forms of correlation. The correlation coefficient improves upon agreement in the indices because it accounts for the ordinal nature of ratings. Note that the correlation coefficient is often used when ratings are given on an ordinal scale. So, ang correlation and coefficient is ayara siya magamit kung ang ratings are given on ordinal scale. Then, the correlation coefficient tells us how consistent raters are in their rank orderings of individuals. Orderings that are close to being an agreement are given more weight when determining this overall consistency. Thus, the correlation coefficient overcomes this limitation of the agreement indices. However, the main limitation of correlation is that it ignores systematic differences in ratings when focusing on their rank orders. So, if two raters provide consistently different ratings, for example, if one rater is more forgiving overall, the correlation coefficient can still be high as long as the rank ordering of individuals does not change. We have here an example. Data for 5 individuals receiving scores on a 10-point scale from 2 raters. We have 5 individuals, which is 1, 2, 3, and to 5. Rater 1, which is the X, rater 2, Y, and we have here the example. So, the coefficient R value shows that there is very high relationship between the rater scores. This means that the individuals performed consistently. So the inter-rater reliability or the IRR, it determines how similar the data collected by different raters. So as we can see, the the same ang result sa rater 1 and then the rater 2. So to sum it up, reliability of test Reliability of test is important for making instructional and evaluation decisions about the students. Since instructors assign grades based on assessment information, it gathers about their students. So the information must have a high degree of validity in order to be, what do you call that? In order to be valued. So that would be all for the Unit 2, the reliability of test. Thank you.
Hello everyone, a pleasant day. By the way, I am Alan S. Bulay, and this is the continuation of Module 4, Properties of Assessment Methods. So I will be discussing Unit 3, which tackles fairness, practicality, and ethics in assessment. So first, let us discuss fairness. So the word fairness covers a lot of ideas and concepts. This includes student knowledge and learning targets of assessment. Second, opportunity to learn and not to discriminate. Third, prerequisite knowledge and skills. Fourth, avoiding teacher stereotype. And fifth, avoiding bias in assessment tasks and procedures. So we have idea number 1, student knowledge and learning targets of assessment. So, for an assessment to be fair, students need to know exactly what the learning targets are and what methods of assessment will be used. And second, we have opportunity to learn, not to discriminate. So, fairness also involves the idea that assessment doesn't just to discriminate learners, but in fact, an opportunity to learn. So the main purpose of this is to measure the extent of learning and not to judge the learners. Third, prerequisite knowledge and skills. So students should know something or understand first before learning. Students should also understand how their development will be measured so that they can better organize and manage their time and effort. For instance, so have you noticed that most of the teachers at the beginning of the school year, before they were going to discuss a certain lesson, they discuss first the grading system such as the performance task, oral exams or written exams, and many more. And how will they assess and evaluate the students in the subject? So in this way, it helps students to figure the amount of knowledge they should achieve. Fourth, avoiding teacher stereotype. So we must have freedom from stereotyping. We all know that stereotyping greatly affects learning. So teachers should avoid stereotyping, like for instance, girls are better in science and boys excel more in mathematics. So negative stereotypes in the classroom or in the other learning context might hinder students' capacity to acquire and remember new informations. So another, favoritism should also be avoided to avoid halo effect or the tendency for the teacher to give favor and more considerations to the students to whom they prefer as compared to other students. So, favoritism in the classroom is widely regarded as fundamentally unjust, contributing to imbalances that affect students' success and failures. So, favoritism can harm a teacher's reputation. Students who aren't favored are more likely to have bad feelings about the instructor or the professor or the teacher, and possibly in the school. And lastly, the last idea is that avoiding bias in assessment tasks and procedures. So this pertains to the intent that each question should be made as clear as possible to the examinees and the test is absent to any biases. So it should be an opportunity to learn rather than an opportunity to weed out poor and slow learners. For instance, there was a naughty child, so he shouldn't be given low grades in math just for the main reason of his behavior, not his mathematical ability. So the second one is practicality and efficiency. There were also numerous ideas that covers practicality and efficiency. We have assessment is practical and efficient. Third, it should be implementable. And lastly, the number of items is not complicated. So let us first discuss or further deep this idea about assessment is practical and efficient. So assessment is practical and efficient if first the teacher has the competence to administer it. So a practical test is one which can be practically administered. Test can be made more practical by making it more objective. So we must take note that something practical is something effective in real situations. So the second idea, it should be implementable. So a teacher should be able to develop, administer, and market within the available time and with available resources. Third, number of items is not complicated. It shouldn't be too complicated because it may cause difficulty in scoring and misinterpretation of the results. If doing so, it may also cause the assessment to be inefficient since it would require a lot of time for feedback, which is very important in drawing out significant conclusions. So we must bear it in our mind that assessment must be familiar to the teachers. They must be aware of their own talents and weaknesses in order to effectively understand the reactions of the students or the responses of the students. So, using an unfamiliar evaluation or assessment approach puts time and resources at risk, resulting in odd results from students' responses. So, there were also other ideas that we must consider, such as we have time required, complexity of administration, ease of scoring, ease of interpretation, and cost. So we have time required, and the multiple choice test is under on this. So a multiple choice test takes quite a long time to prepare, but only a few minutes for students to complete and instructors to assess or to score or to evaluate. Second, essay test. It takes a less time in preparing than other types of tests, but they take longer time to score. Third, performance evaluation or assessment. So it is certainly most time consuming. Another, complexity of administration. So assessment that requires long, complicated directions and setup are less efficient. Third, ease of scoring. So scoring need to match your method and purpose. Fourth, ease of interpretation. It provides sufficient information so that whatever interpretation is made is accurate. And lastly, we have cost. Assessments are inexpensive. And the third one, we have ethics in assessment. So the word ethics is very familiar to us, but it defines a deeper meaning or concept. When we say ethics, it is a code of moral standards of conduct for what is good or right as opposed to bad or wrong. So, according to Webster Dictionary, ethical defined as conforming to the standards of conduct of a given profession or a group. So let us also define what is moral. So on the other hand, moral refers to what society sanctions right and acceptable. So in the simplest idea, the word ethics refers to the application of moral principles in the way that we conduct our individual or group behaviors. So, embedding ethics assessment involves decision making in ways appropriate to a particular educational context or situation. These decisions involve the selection and articulation of learning outcomes, how students will provide evidence of their achievement of the learning objectives, the basis of assessment judgments, and how students will be involved in the assessment process. First, we have articulation of learning outcomes. So, articulated learning outcome is an important part of developing a good syllabus. So, we should have a common language such as goals, objectives, learning outcomes, and proficiencies in our learning because it is important to satisfy our ethical standards. So, a learning outcomes assess teachers and students in reaching a common understanding of a course or academic programs, purpose, and goals. So, learning outcomes that are well defined will help to minimize any confusion and provide a mechanism to assess if your students have learned what you have expected them to learn. And second, we have the selection of assessment methods. It is indeed selecting assessment task is a complex process. So you must consider the learning and the teaching environment as well as the impact of numerous elements. So above all, we must choose assessment activities that are well aligned with the designed learning outcomes, and you must focus on the overall assessment design on promoting, enabling, and supporting learning outcome. That is assessment as learning. Third, we have the basis for judgments. For the ethics in assessment, we have number 4, the role of students in the assessment process. So, in order to make the assessment of learning possible, students' behaviors include the learning goals, developing success criteria, providing feedback to peers, and receiving feedback from teachers and peers. Asking students to demonstrate their understanding of the subject matter is critical to the learning process. It is essential to evaluate whether the educational goals and standards of the lessons are being met. So that's the end of the lesson. I hope you learned something. Thank you and God bless.